Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking a look at a blue-green and colorless or semi-colorless deck, which is a 3-color mid-range / ramp deck that features a lot of the new blue-green cards from Amonkhet, as well as some of the best blue-green cards from sets past in Magic Duels. So a lot of fun, a lot of value, so let's dive right into it here, starting out with Walking Ballista, which is a nice mana sink in a deck like this one, where you can potentially produce a lot of mana in the late game, so you can put that into a nice big Walking Ballista, or of course you can use the ability here to pay for to put an additional +1/+1 counter on it, and then of course removing a counter to deal damage means we have a nice removal spell in blue-green, which is a pretty rare thing. We also have Sylvan Advocate, which is not as good as he used to be, since we're also not playing as many sorceries that put additional lands into play, which would make the Sylvan Advocate bigger a lot faster, but it's still a fine card since it's a nice 2/3 with Vigilance for 2 mana, and then of course when you do hit land number 6 he becomes bigger and also gives your land creatures +2/+2, and there's a few of those in the deck. We also have Druid of the Cowl, which is a nice mana ramp creature, which can potentially let us cast our 4 mana cards on turn 3. And then of course 3 toughness means it's a decent blocker and can also survive some removal spells. Speaking of removal spells, we also have Spatial Contortion, which is a nice addition from playing colorless mana in our deck. So this is a 2 mana instant, gives a creature +3/-3 until end of turn. So most of the time you should just view this as a 2 mana 3 damage removal spell, but there are corner cases where you can use the +3 power to your benefit, where you can maybe use this as a pump spell to finish off the opponent. We're also playing Nissa, Steward of Elements, which is another nice versatile card from Amonkhet with X in the mana cost, so you can play this on turn 3 for X = 1, or late in the game you can play a giant Nissa and maybe ultimate her right away. Then of course the +2 lets us scry 2, which sets up the 0 ability nicely, where you can look at the top card and maybe put a land or creature into play if the creature is not too expensive, and then the -6 makes 2 of your lands into 5/5 flying creatures, which also get bigger if you have a Sylvan Advocate in play. Then we also have Nissa Vastwood Seer as a nice value creature, 3 mana that searches up a forest, and then when we hit land number 7, she transforms into Sage Animist, which can draw us additional cards. Speaking of drawing cards, we also have Tireless Tracker, which is a must-have in pretty much any green deck, and this is no exception, since we can even play her turn 3 when we have a Druid of the Cowl, and then get a clue token right away when we play our 3rd land, so we can get value right away without having to wait until turn 4. And then of course when we sacrifice a clue, she gets a +1/+1 counter, so can also beat down quite nicely. Then we have a one-off Reclamation Sage that we can also search up with our Woodland Bellower to deal with artifacts or enchantments. Then we also have Weaver of Currents, which is a 3 mana 2/2 from Amonkhet that adds 2 colorless mana to our mana pool, so this can also help us cast our colorless Eldrazi spells, and of course ramping us for 2 is quite nice, since this can let us cast our very expensive spells early on in the game. Then we also have a Rogue Refiner, which is another nice value creature, 3 mana 3/2 that draws a card when he enters the battlefield, and also gives us 2 energy, which can help us fix our mana with our Aether Hubs. We also have Altered Ego, which is yet another card with X in the mana cost, so this is basically an uncounterable clone that also enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter for the X that we paid. So this can get quite big when we have a lot of mana. Then we also have Thought-Knot Seer, which is one of the main reasons to add colorless to your decks. So this is a 4 mana 4/4 that gets to exile a card from the opponent's hand, and then when he dies the opponent does get to draw a card, but of course it's not going to be the same that got exiled. We also have Bounty of the Luxa, which is a nice draw engine from Amonkhet, 4 mana, and then one turn it's gonna draw us a card, and the other turn it's gonna add colorless, blue and green to our mana pool in our first main phase. So of course both abilities are very relevant in this deck, since drawing cards is always great, but also adding mana means we can maybe ramp out a big creature a few turns sooner. Then we also have Kiora, Master of Depths, which is actually at her best in this kind of deck, where the +1 ability can untap a ramp creature, like for example Weaver of Currents or Druid of the Cowl. So that way, besides untapping a land, we're also untapping a mana creature, which can then add even more mana to our mana pool to cast giant spells very early in the game. Then of course the -2 can draw some additional cards, and the -8 releases the Krakens. Then we also have a Reality Smasher, which is our other colorless Eldrazi, so 5 mana for a 5/5 with Trample and Haste, and if the opponent wants to target it with a removal spell, they're gonna have to discard a card, otherwise that card will get countered. So just a nice beater that can close out games very quickly. Then we have Woodland Bellower, which is a nice 6 mana 6/5 that searches up a non-legendary green creature with convert mana cost 3 or less. So the only creature it can't get is our Nissa that searches up a land, but otherwise everything is fair game. So we can get maybe a Rogue Refiner, maybe we need some more ramp and we can get a Weaver of Currents, maybe we need to draw multiple cards and we can get a Tireless Tracker. So a lot of different options. Then we also have Ulvenwald Hydra, which is a 6 mana star, power and toughness equal to the number of lands we control, has reach, which is important since the deck can be weak against flyers, and then when it enters the battlefield we get to search our library for a land and put it into play tapped, and we do have some nice value lands to go get with our Ulvenwald Hydra. Then we have Sandwurm Convergence, which is a very exciting card from Amonkhet. It is pretty pricey at 8 mana, but it's an enchantment that says creatures with flying can't attack you or planeswalkers you control, so this does help us against those pesky flyers. And then at the beginning of your end step, make a 5/5 green worm creature token, so every turn we get a 5/5 that can certainly close out the game. So just a very nice curve topper here in our ramp deck. Then we also have 2 copies of Spring to Mind, which is just a nice ramp card with some value attached on the Aftermath that lets us draw 2 cards at instant speed. So don't want to play too many ramp cards, but when your ramp cards are attached to a draw 2, then they become a little more appealing. And then finally we also have Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, for when we have a lot of mana and when we really need to kill the opponent dead. Then casting Ulamog, exiling 2 permanents and getting us a 10/10 indestructible creature that mills the opponent for 20 when he attacks. I would say that's a pretty good way to close out the game. And then our mana base, where we've got 3 islands, 5 forests, 1 waste, so we can fetch colorless mana with our Evolving Wilds. Then 2 copies of Lumbering Falls, which can turn into a hexproof 3/3, which will be even bigger with a Sylvan Advocate in play. Then some colorless value lands here in Westvale Abbey that can make some tokens and maybe transform into an Ormondal. Hinterland Harbor for mana fixing. And then another value land in Rogue's Passage, which can make our big creatures unblockable. Then we've got Aether Hub, which is basically a 3-color land in this deck, making colorless mana and also colored mana when we pay energy, which we also have the Rogue Refiners that can maybe add some additional energy. Then we also have Crumbling Vestige, which is kind of a bad Aether Hub, in that it makes colored mana of any color when we play it, but it enters the battlefield tapped, and then it adds colorless mana going forward. And then we also have Evolving Wilds, which can get all 3 colors and also goes very well with our Tireless Tracker, giving us an additional clue token. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which only has the 1 land, so I think we have to try again. Alright, this will work. Unfortunate that we have 2 tap lands here, but we should be able to find an island or a forest in our first couple draws here. Maybe a bit of a slow hand with no real ramp cards, but a fine mid-range hand with multiple value creatures and a Thought-Knot Seer. Alright, let's play a tapped harbor in case we find something like a Druid of the Cowl we want to play next turn. Although I guess we could still use a Crumbling Vestige to play a green card. No turn 2 play from the opponents, or at least they're thinking about it, so might maybe be a Walking Ballista. And there's our Evolving Wilds, which I think I want to keep now to go with our Tireless Tracker. So I think I'll just play out another Hinterland Harbor tapped. Then next turn we need to make sure to play a Colorless land, so that we leave open the option of a turn 4 Thought-Knot Seer. Festering Mummy, that's fine. So here the plan is to play out a Rogue Refiner. And yeah, then next turn we can go Tracker Evolving Wilds. Let's add red mana just because. Play a Rogue Refiner, which draws a card. There's a Reality Smasher. So we could potentially go on the beatdown plan here with Smashers and then maybe copy a Smasher. Alright, so their opponent's playing black-white zombies. Wayward Servant into Trial of Ambition. Alright, that's fine. Don't mind sacrificing the Rogue Refiner here. Already drew us a card. But I guess if the opponent can return a Trial to their hand, it could get a bit annoying. But I think we would rather play Tracker Evolving Wilds than Thought-Knot Seer here, just because that uses up our tap land in a nice way, and then next turn we can go either Reality Smasher or one of these other ones, and then the turn later play an Ulvenwald Hydra. So we basically just want to trade resources here as much as possible, since we do have the late game locked down with all these value plays. So if the opponent attacks with the Servant, I'm certainly blocking. Alright, opponent does have a Cartouche, so they get to return the Trial, but if they don't have another land, they can't replay it this turn. Alright, I guess they can. But now of course we would not be able to profitably trade with the Servant. Opponent does still replay the Trial of Ambition, so we have to sacrifice our Tracker. Meanwhile, opponent gave the Servant +1/+1 on lifelink, so they're attacking for 4. So let's take a look here. Found a Spring, which I don't think we need here, although we could sack a Clue and then still play Spring if we wanted to. But I think this turn we want to play a Thought-Knot Seer just to see what our opponent's holding before they empty out their hand, and to maybe inform our decisions going forward, rather than playing the Smasher. Alright, time to reflect. It's a good one to get rid of, and then we know our opponent has a Swamp in hand. So unless our opponent draws something, we should be able to block the 3/3 zombie. And if the opponent doesn't attack, we know we stabilized, and then we can start casting our bigger creatures. Another Rogue Refiner. So here we could go Rogue Refiner plus Spring, or we could just play a Hydra, which also seems fine. Don't think we need to Altered Ego here anything. Would rather Altered Ego the Hydra, so yeah, let's make sure to play the Hydra here. Get another land in play, ramp us some more. Think we can get an island. Or I guess we might as well get a Lumbering Falls, since it enters tapped anyways. And I'm not gonna offer the trade here. Dread Wanderer, that's fine. It's gonna drain us for 1 every turn if the opponent can keep getting it back from the graveyard. But we're still at 14, so not under a ton of pressure. No attacks from the opponent, that's good. Think we want to play the Altered Ego here. Could also go Rogue Refiner plus Altered Ego without paying any in the X, which also seems fine, since it develops our board a tiny bit more, and the 7/7 should be big enough. So the opponent could have instant speed removal for the Hydra when we go to play the Altered Ego, but then we can still copy a Thought-Knot Seer. I guess I would rather copy a Rogue Refiner, perhaps. So we should probably play the Rogue Refiner first, just in case our opponent does kill the Hydra. And there we found a Nissa, which is also nice, so let's play Altered Ego, see if the opponent has anything. Nope, we can copy the Hydra, which will find us another land, which will be... we could get Rogue's Passage or another Lumbering Falls. I think Rogue's Passage is probably more relevant, making our 8/8s unblockable. And now I do feel comfortable attacking. I think we still keep the Thought-Knot Seer on defense, since I don't want to give the opponent an extra card. Opponent takes 8, and we have a ton of options next turn. We can transform a Nissa, we can play a Reality Smasher, we can make one of our creatures unblockable. Can maybe think about transforming our Westvale Abbey. So can't really go wrong. And looks like our opponent's last card was Never, which they can use to kill our Hydra, and they could still exile something from the graveyard as well. And looks like they will do that, exiling our Altered Ego, draining us for 1. But luckily we kept our Thought-Knot Seer on defense, so no good attacks for the opponent. Alright, Spatial Contortion is an interesting one. So let's see here, we've got 5, 6, 7, 8 mana. So we could go Reality Smasher plus Nissa. And if we attack with the Hydra, opponent maybe quadruple blocks. Then we can blow them out with Spatial Contortion. Don't hate that. So we could have played the Reality Smasher pre-combat. But I think I'm gonna try attacking with the Hydra here, which might induce... Alright, opponent's just chomping with the Dread Wanderer, that's fine. So I think now we can play the Nissa. Get another land. And then transform Nissa. +1. Find Forest, put that into play. And let's see here, we can still potentially play the Smasher, or we can play Druid and then keep up Spatial Contortion plus maybe some clues, or we can play Spring. It's probably better, play Spring, gets an island, and then keep up Clue plus Spatial Contortion. So when the opponent goes to return the Dread Wanderer, we can kill the Wayward Servant in response. So we don't get drained unnecessarily. Opponent has a Bone Picker. Alright, I guess they got to play that for 1 mana, but they had 4 mana anyways, so it doesn't really matter. And there's an Ulamog, which is gonna make things even easier. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of the Dread Wanderer. Otherwise we could have just made our Hydra unblockable in 2 turns. Sack a clue. Alright. I'm fine if our opponent wants to double block the Thought-Knot Seer. Let's just send in everyone. Don't think we can die from 13. And our opponent takes it. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at a mulligan. And this is a keep. Do want a 3rd land here for spring. And hopefully our opponent's not on a very aggressive deck, although Insolent Neonate could indicate either a Madness or a Vampire deck. Perhaps even a Reanimator deck. Alright, there's Hinterland Harbor. So I think we just play a forest here. Let's not give our opponent too much information. So hopefully no scary 2-drop, so that we have time to deploy all these sweet cards. An attack for 1, that's fine. And no play, alright. Opponent could of course still Madness out something with a Neonate end of turn. So certainly not out of the woods yet. Think we'll play the Aether Hub. Not that it really matters here, but at least we can represent having removal. And alright, no sacrificing of the Neonate end of turn, I like that. And a Sanitarium as their 3rd land. But they are sacrificing the Neonate here, so they do have, unfortunately, the Incorrigible Youths, which is gonna hit us pretty hard here. And of course we are on the draw, so might be dead before we play out all our cards. This opponent hits us for 4, down to 15. Alright, alright, alright. There's a Rogue Refiner. Can block the youths. And draws us a card. And next turn we can either play the Altered Ego to copy something or play the Bounty. Maybe even Kiora. Let's see if they have removal for the Rogue Refiner here. Alright, I'm certainly blocking here, even though they could have a trick. Alright, the trade happens, that's good. And the follow-up is an Heir of Falkenrath. And anything else. So that can potentially become a 3-2 flyer. And looks like they're holding up maybe the transformation with Madness, maybe a Fiery Temper. So yeah, I think this is a good spot to play out our Bounty of Luxa. Kiora would probably just die, so it's probably not worth playing her here. But looks like a good spot for the Bounty, which draws us a card next turn and then ramps us a turn later, which is certainly relevant. So hopefully we can avoid taking too much damage on the following turn. And it looks like the Heir of Falkenrath is not transforming quite yet. Maybe the opponent has another youths they want to Madness out. And alright, instead it's Alms of the Vein, which drains us for 3, but at least it doesn't add another scary creature to the board. And at some point we can play a big Altered Ego to copy the Heir to the Night, so we can actually block the flyer. And now a Fury Blade Vampire as well. Alright, Tireless Tracker. So a few options here. Can't quite cast our Woodland Bellower. Kiora again is probably just gonna die and not do much. So I think I like playing Tracker, playing a land and sacrificing to get a clue. And then next turn we can maybe play Woodland Bellower to stabilize. Our other option is playing Altered Ego, copying the Heir to the Night, because yeah, we are taking a lot of damage from the flyer. So maybe that's better than playing the Tireless Tracker. Although the Fury Blade Vampire is also going to hit pretty hard, and our opponent hasn't really had the opportunity to use a removal spell yet. Definitely a tricky spot. I certainly don't think we'll have a lot of time to make use of the card advantage from the Tireless Tracker. But the question here is, would we rather have a 4/3 flyer or a 4/3 ground creature, given that our opponent has 2 threats either way? I think I would rather play the Tracker, just because if our opponent does have removal for it, at least we still have a chance of stopping the flyer, which might be more important. And I think we sack it right now to play around the opponent drawing into a 2 damage burn spell, which they could use in response. Alright, there's Spatial Contortion. That can deal with the flyer. The only question is, are we dead this turn, or do we get to untap? If we get to untap, I like our chances. Since we get a ton of mana, we can play Woodland Bellower and Spatial Contortion. And alright, looks like the opponent has an Avacyn's Judgment, which they can play for X equals 3. So we'll take 7 after the opponent kills our Tracker. So not dead yet, but of course our opponent has plenty of burn spells, and we saw the Alms of the Vein, so they can certainly find ways to finish us off. But we do get a ton of mana here, so we've got, let's see, 8-9 mana to work with. So not quite enough for Bellower, Advocate and Spatial Contortion, but we can play Bellower plus Spatial Contortion here, which is still pretty good. Question is, what do we get with the Bellower? I think we just get a Sylvan Advocate, just because it has the most toughness, and can also close out the game while also playing defense thanks to Vigilance. Yes, please. Yeah, I think we have to get Advocate. I guess we might as well use a Spatial Contortion now, since the opponent is gonna attack with it no matter what, since we are at 2, so might as well just save everyone some time. So let's see if they have a burn spell here. Looks like they have a Madness burn spell. Yep, there we go. Avacyn's Judgment, which is gonna finish us off here, unfortunately. So I think had we been on the play, we probably would have been able to stabilize and not take as much damage. Needed that Spatial Contortion a turn sooner. But oh well, let's move on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which is a little heavy on the lands here. Do have a Druid and a Hydra, but I think 5 lands is just a tad too many. So let's try again. Alright, this works. We've got a lot of ramp and a Walking Ballista, and I think we'll get an island right away here. And say go. And as always, spam the continue button since we have a Walking Ballista in hand. Hopefully not up against an aggressive deck here, since our hand is kind of slow out of the gates. Don't mind seeing a Canopy Vista. Alright, Reality Smasher. is good to have access to, since we can play that turn 4 even if we miss a land, if we can play the Weaver next turn. And the opponent with a Smuggler's Copter. Alright, so that changes things a little bit. We shouldn't be seeing too much removal for these Weavers. So next turn we can go Smasher, or we can go Weaver plus maybe something else, although we are kind of stuck with only a forest and an island here. Now we see a Selfless Spirit to crew the Copter. But yeah, I think the plan is to play the Smasher. Although Walking Ballista to kill the Spirit is also pretty enticing. Opponent discards a Harvester. Interesting. And we found a Druid of the Cowl. Does that change our plan? So I would like to get some more colored mana in play. But getting a Reality Smasher going seems pretty good. Our other option would be to maybe play a Spring, plus play a Ballista to take out the Spirit. Are we trying to be the aggressor when the opponent has a Copter in play? It's kind of difficult. But a 5/5 with haste is no joke. I think I'll go with the Smasher here. And then next turn we can think about taking out the Selfless Spirit. And hopefully we find another green source by then. And of course, if the opponent tries to play defense, that's also good for us. It looks like they're still crewing with just a Selfless Spirit, so that's good news. Since that means they're not adding any more creatures to the board. And if they're stuck on 2 lands, then applying pressure with a Reality Smasher is a good idea. They discarded another Harvester and still no 3rd land. Alright, and there's a Kiora. That's interesting. So we can actually kind of combo off here. So we can play Kiora, untap a land plus the Weaver, and then cast some more stuff. That's gotta be pretty good here. Let's go for it. So untap Weaver and Forest. So now we have the option of playing Spring to get another land, or we can just play a Ballista for 2 to take out the Spirit, which seems better. Could even go Druid or Sylvan Advocate here, but I think I like playing the Ballista, since their opponent has trouble presenting creatures, and taking out their only creature seems pretty good here. So take out the Spirit, attack for 5, and we have this Kiora engine going. Alright, opponent has a Blessed Alliance, so they do have an answer for the Smasher. So game's certainly not over yet. But with a Kiora on 5 loyalty, it means we should get at least one other activation out of it. And the opponent has another Selfless Spirit, so they do get to crew the Copter here. But again, we have the Walking Ballista to take out the Spirit. No need to do it right now. We can wait and keep our options open. Opponent discards a Thalia. So let's see if they found the 3rd land now. They still haven't. Alright, and we did find an island, still no forest though, but thanks to Kiora we do get to use this forest twice every turn. So let's have a look. Definitely playing out the island, although we could consider -2ing on Kiora, but I think keeping her around seems good. So yeah, let's play the island. Then we have 6, 7, 8, 9 mana available this turn, but only 2 green. So I think we want to think about investing some more counters in this Ballista. So let's see, we can play Weaver. So let's add 2 colorless mana, play Weaver, then untap Weaver plus Forest. And now we could play Sylvan Advocate or Druid of the Cowl. I think we play the Advocate just to apply more pressure, and then we tap the Weaver for another counter on the Ballista. Then we can attack for 2, and then second main phase take out the Selfless Spirit. So it's pretty likely that our Kiora dies here to the Copter, but we have a pretty good board now. We can cast Spring and develop our board some more, maybe put some more counters on the Ballista, and there we see our opponent with Prairie Stream tapped, so they are playing 3 colors, which might explain why they had trouble casting their spells. And now we see Greenbelt Rampager, and in response to it being returned, opponent's gonna crew the Smuggler's Copter. So Kiora will die, but we did get some good uses out of her already, so I'm not too sad. And actually if we draw land here and play Spring, our Sylvan Advocate will be a 4/5. And the opponent discards Nissa. And do they have anything else, or are they replaying the Greenbelt? They are. Alright, but it's our pretty developed board against the opponent's Smuggler's Copter, which I'm feeling pretty good about. And there's a bounty of the Luxa, which is also very good. So now the question is, do we want to play out this Spring or the bounty? I think we would rather play the bounty. And then the question is, do we just attack with the Weavers or do we pump the Ballista for 1? We do deal a lot more damage by just attacking. So we would be attacking for 7, which puts our opponent potentially dead next turn. So yeah, I think I like just attacking with the Weavers. Playing the bounty and moving on. Attack with everyone. Opponent's at 6. Opponent can finally keep the Greenbelt Rampager in play. But now they're gonna have to play defense. So I don't think we'll see a Smuggler's Copter getting crewed, and in fact we see a second Smuggler's Copter, which might explain why the opponent was so keen on discarding these Harvesters to begin with. And alright, looks like the Copter is getting crewed, and it is attacking, but that means their opponent's dead on the way back. Let's see what we draw. A Weaver for our draw step and a Rogue's Passage, thanks to our bounty. So we can play a land, play our Spring, which is going to make our Advocate into a 4/5. And we desperately needed another forest here. And we could even, if we wanted to, cast the Aftermath here, since we do have 6 mana. But let's attack with everyone, Could have also pumped our Walking Ballista some more, but this will do it. Alright, I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day.